Thank you.
Farley's, hi Farley's.
Yeah. All right. Hi, Lori. I like to tell everybody hello. We're going to get started with Sue Champagner from Philadelphia. You traveled a long way, so tell us our story.
Oh, I'm supposed to hide me. It's not. I'm looking at myself while I tell. So give me a second. I'm gonna cover me up. Okay. Now I'm gonna tell you. Once, a long time ago.
Sound is not good.
Can't hear you.
It's very soft.
Okay, I'm
It's
gonna.
there, but it's very.
Okay, I'm gonna move the computer a little closer. That's really strange. Usually you can.
Okay, there I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So, at the end of the 18th century, the famous traveling preacher, Governor Maggid, is to listen. And somebody's not muted, and I can hear all the.
You're cutting out. I can't hear a complete.
I think it's Levita who's not muted. Can you mute everybody but Suze?
Okay.
And I'll try and lean in because I'm not sure why it's. I don't understand.
I have now muted everybody.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Except you're muted. Wait.
I'm not hearing anything.
Suze, you need to unmute yourself.
It again. Okay. All right. Screw it. Let's just get going. At the end of the 18th century, the Governor Maggid, the famous traveling preacher, moved to Lithuania. And there he met the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon was a famous scholar. That's what Gaon means, a scholar. And so one day he asked the Governor Maggid why it was that when he was reciting Torah, there was maybe 10 people in the synagogue. But when he shared a parable, the sanctuary was packed. The Governor Maggid replied with a parable. Once upon a time, truth went out in the world as naked as the day he was born. And as a result, no one would have anything to do with him. If they saw him coming down the street, they would go the other way. He was so sad. And one day he was walking around in the street when he saw Parable. And Parable was dressed in a beautiful robe of yellow and blue. He looked splendid. And Parable saw Truth and went over to him and said, "Neighbor, why do you look so sad?" "Ugh, I'm old, so old that no one will have anything to do with me." Parable replied, "I too am old, very old, but it seems the older I get, the better people like me. I will let you in on a little secret. People like things in disguise, prettied up. If you wear one of my robes, you will see that the same people who shut their door to you will welcome you into their homes." And so Truth took Parable's advice and put on one of these splendid robes. And Truth and Parable went out in the world hand in hand, and everybody loved them. They make the most happy pair. Well, the Governor Maggid was in a synagogue, a local synagogue, and he heard a lay preacher actually a scholar speaking. On Shabbos afternoons, Saturday afternoons, people would go up to the bima, the platform in the middle of the sanctuary, and they would speak. Well, this man was talking about the Talmud and the Torah portion and who knows what else. And while he was doing that, he was heaping scorn on the folk preacher who had spoken before him. Well, when the man was done, the Dubner Maggid went up to him and said, I have a parable that I think you will find instructive. Once there was a merchant, a great and clever man, and he saw that the big town where he lived had many rich and powerful people. And so he opened a jewelry store, and he was quite successful. Well, as things happen, he moved to a small town. And he saw that this small town, this village, really a shtetl, everyone there was poor and threadbare. So he decided to open a store. Well, a little shop, really, where he sold herring and kerosene and string, ordinary stuff. And he was quite satisfied with this store. He was more satisfied than he was in the big city. One day, a friend of his from that big city came to visit in the shtetl and came into the little shop and said, "Oh, my friend, this is not right. The same hands that would display gems and gold jewelry are now dipping into herring and pickle barrels. This is not right." The clever merchant responded, "You just don't understand. When I lived in the big city and had the jewelry store, my customers were connoisseurs of gold and fine gems. But here, the people are poor. They work with their hands. They wouldn't understand diamonds. They don't need diamonds. What they need, yes, what they need is a bit of herring, a pinch of salt, and a morsel of bread." And that's it from the Dubner Maggid.
Thank you, Suze. Thank you so much for that. Good wisdom to hold in.
For our times.
Yes, for sure. Next, we have Bobby Kincaid. Let's get Bobby prepared here and unmuted. Unmute yourself, Bobby. There, right there. There we go.
Am I muted?
You're ready.
Hello, everybody. I'm in the forest. My tale is by Hans Christian Andersen, not one of my favorite folktale gatherers. He took credit for a lot of folktales that he didn't write. He just glorified them, as all fairy tales do, back in the centuries when only men told stories. All right. It's for my damsels overcome philosophy I'm working on. Elsa was very happy. She lived with her 11 brothers and her mother and father in this great big castle. Every day they had fun. They went to school. They played in the yard. Unfortunately, her mother died, and Elsa and her 11 brothers were left with her father, who married this very wicked stepmother. First thing she did was to grab Elsa by her hair, drag her to the village, and say to one of the ladies, "Teach her how to weave how to work in the fields and cook. I'll be back for her later. She went back and the 11 brothers were outside playing and having a good time. She swished her arms and turned them into swans, and they went away. They went over Elsa's hut and beeped and honked and screeched, but she couldn't hear them. She was in pain. Well, as time goes on, 15 years pass, and the father, the king, wanted to see his daughter. Well, the wicked stepmother was going to have nothing to do with this. So she took Elsa, smeared walnut oil on her, dirtied her hair, and her servants helped hold Elsa down, made mud all over her clothing, and then took her to her father. And he looked and said, "This is not my daughter." Well, Elsa got so upset, she ran out deep, deep, deep into the woods, and she cried and she cried. No brothers, no mother. She's by herself. Well, eventually she fell asleep. Next morning, she wakes up and she hears a very wonderful gurgling sound. She goes over and she looks in to wash her face, and she sees her stains, her dirty hair. She just jumps into this little pool, washes herself off, gets up, and decides to walk down the creek. Well, as she's walking down, she meets an older woman picking berries, and she stops, and Elsa was hungry, and the woman gave her some berries, and Elsa said, "Have you seen seven young men with crowns on their head?" And the lady looked at her and said, "No, but I saw 11 swans with crowns on their heads." And Elsa said, "Oh, that's my brothers." And she said, "Where?" She said, "Follow this all the way down to a river, and then it's in by the ocean." So Elsa did that, took her day. She got there just about dusk, and she was on the beach, and she looked, and there were swan feathers. So she picked up a few. Then she heard this noise, and she hid, and down these 11 swans came, and all of a sudden the sun went down. They turned into young men, and Elsa was so happy she ran out. "Brothers, brothers, I found you, I found you." Well, they looked at Elsa, and they loved her, and they sang songs, and they told of the happy times they had in the castle. And then one of them said, "You know what, we have to fly south tomorrow. I don't know how we're going to take you." And she says, "Weave the willows." So they wove the willows all night long and made a lovely little net for her. And they put her in the net, and the next morning, they're swans again. They go up and they fly over this vast, vast ocean. And finally they come to a country that has mountains, and they lie in the mountains close to the ocean, not too far away. They're swans, of course. And there's a cave for Elsa to live in. Well, she goes in the cave, and she makes it the best she can with what she has in the forest. And she falls asleep. She dreams of Moraga. She's an ancient witch that helps people in the Nordic area. So she said, "Elsa, listen, you can help your brothers. You have to weave the nettles. They're terrible. They're going to blister you. You cannot speak. And if you run out of nettles, you have to walk through the graveyard to get them." And she said, "Really, if I weave 5 shirts and my brothers will be safe?" She says, "Yes, put the shirts on them while they're swans, they'll be safe. But if you don't finish, or if you talk, they'll die." Well, Elsa had a purpose. She ran out, she gathered the nettles. They stung her hands. She beat on them with her feet to get the leaves off. They stung her feet, and then she stripped them down. She started weaving. She was on about her second shirt when she heard this noise, and this hound came into her cave and started yelling. And all of a sudden, this handsome young king comes in, and he sees her, and he says, "Oh, maiden, you don't have to live like this." And she shook her head, "No, no." And he said, "You're going to come with me." And she said, "No, no." And she grabbed her nettles and her shirts, and he said, "Okay, you can bring them along." So they took her back to his castle, and they gave her a nice little room, hung her shirts up, put her nettles out, and she starts weaving. Well, of course, he falls in love with her. He comes by every day, and she's beautiful because her maids washed her hair, gave her a nice dress to wear and shoes, and she looks wonderful, and she's busy on a task. So he says, "Will you marry me?" And she says, she cries, and she looks at him, and she kisses his hands, and they hug. So that meant yes. And she was doing fine. She's on about her, I'd say, 7th shirt. She runs out of nettles, and she says, "Oh my," she looks all over the castle yard. There aren't any. It's getting late at night, so she has to go down to the graveyard. Well, she finally gets there, and what she sees are these terrible gourd goons, whatever they are, slurping up the dead, and it smells terrible and it sounds awful. First they look at her, but she just focuses on her task and she goes around them. She picks all the nettles she needs, and when she comes back, they don't even notice her. And she goes back and she starts weaving and weaving. Well, days go by and she finds on her 11th shirt, but of course, late in the evening, she runs out of nettles, so she has to go back to the graveyard. This time, the guard followed her. And she goes to the graveyard, and there are those awful ghouls in there slurping and eating and smelling. And the guard he just stands there stunned. Well, Elsa, she's focused. She walks around, she gets her nettles, she comes back. And by this time, the guard sees her and he wakes up and he says, oh, she's with the evil. So he follows her back, and she's in her room, and he tells the king, and they come in and they take her down into the dungeon, but she's holding on her shirts and holding on her nettles. And so they throw everything in this dungeon and lock her in. Next morning they come and they try to drag her out. She's into her 11th shirt. She's almost finished with it. They take her out and they drag her and they put her in this cart. And in the meantime, her brothers are looking for her. And this cart starts, and the village years, she's a witch, burner. Well, the beautiful swans lay around, get around her cart that she ends, put their wings up, and one by one she gives them a shirt to put on. And as they put it on, they turn into young men, except the very last brother. She didn't get the last sleeve woven, so he had a wing. What they do then is they get together and they decide to go back and confront their father, which they do, and they all live happily ever after. And that is the story of Elsa and how she overcame obstacle after obstacle. All right. Thank you.
Give Bobby some high fives. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Obstacle after obstacle,
Yes.
just like on the Zoom here. We fight over these obstacles. I was wondering if Ron Chick would like to go next. I think he's mouthed, of course, but I gotta get him unmuted. Unmute yourself, Ron.
There we go. Got my voice?
I do. Yeah, we're
Okay.
ready. Thank you.
You know, I've always loved peanuts. They remind me of baseball games and circuses and similar such events, picnics, good times in general, but mostly of circuses. Say, did I ever tell you about the first circus I ever went near? It was in the spring, April, I think, of 1908, when the circus came to town. We had all gotten mighty excited watching the parade down 7th Street in Margaret. And we were all looking forward to the show. The morning show was cheaper. So that's the one my friends and I all got to go to. Well, the adults and the older kids were going to go to the evening show. So we'd seen our circus. We were having fun. The greatest thing about it, though, was Snyder. Snyder the bull elephant, billed as the greatest elephant west of the Mississippi. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But when he was walking down the street, he seemed as big as a house to me. Some of the kids said afterwards that they could feel his footprints on the ground, but I couldn't, and I was no more than 4 or 5 feet from him as he went by. So we were all hanging around the outside of the circus when the trouble started. The elephants had all been staked out in an empty field over on Vine Street when there was a fire at the refinery, and a loud boom. Snyder either smelled the smoke or heard the boom, but he pulled on his chains, and his herd pulled on their chains, and they pulled them out of the muddy ground and headed down Vine Street, going away from the fire. They had run on a short distance when the sheriff on his horse came riding around the corner thinking, oh, I got to do something about the fire. And he was confronted by a herd of wild elephants trumpeting and making all sorts of noise, and frankly, being more than a little scary. He pulled out his pistol and fired a shot into the air. Bang. And that, of course, turned Snyder, turned him right toward downtown Riverside on 7th Avenue. As they went around the corner, one of their chains caught on a house porch and yanked that porch clear from its building, making more noise and frightening the elephants even more. They were running down 7th Street, and Snyder spotted what he thought might be a cave. It was actually the shelter for horses for the Methodist Church, but he got in there and his herd followed in after him, and there just wasn't room for him to turn around or move any further forward without pushing into the wall, so he did. He pushed his way right on through and went on across the way. The rest of his herd, the girls, all stayed behind in this cool under roof thing, but he went stomping on alone. As he turned the corner, he saw a big plate glass window in front of a barber shop, and he thought another elephant. And so he turned and went up to the glass and went right on through into the barber shop. By now, of course, people from all around had gathered behind him. He couldn't go one way, he couldn't go the other way. So he turned and he went through the wall of that place, bringing the barber shop down behind him, and went running on down the street, still very upset. But by now, Snyder was finally getting tired. He started to slow down. And as he slowed down, he heard the sound of elephants trumpeting. And he looked up 8th Street, and there the circus people had gathered up the rest of the herd and were slowly moving them along. Well, that looked good to Snyder. He stopped running, went quickly down the street, joined his herd. The great elephant stampede was over. But this story didn't end there. On foggy nights for years after that, maybe to this very day, people who had been there would say they could see Snyder, great shape in the foggy nights. And they could hear the slight thump, thump, thump of heavy feet. And perhaps if you're in Riverside on a Halloween night and it happens to be foggy, you might just run in to the ghosts of the great elephant stampede. The story itself is written up in the Press Enterprise from April 26th, 1908. There are 2 versions. The Morning Enterprise has this version with all of the characterizations, all put in by circus personnel. The evening edition, much more fact-based, has things like the names of the people whose perch was injured, why the sheriff didn't shoot at the elephants, the nature of the damage of all the things a newspaper would do. I like my version better. And that is the tale of the great elephant stampede, and an absolutely true story.
Absolutely. And yes, so be listening to, as he said, the slight thumping.
Light thumping, yes.
Light thumping. Okay, there we go. The light thumping, and it'll come louder and louder the more you.
Obviously, I wasn't there in person.
You brought us there. That was the fun part, to bring us back to that scene. Okay, let me line up a couple more so you know who's coming up. John, let's see. Yes, so it's not a surprise here. Okay, I can see everybody. What if we have John and then Thelma for the next two? Just nod yes, is that okay? John, are you going to be ready in 10 seconds? Yeah, unmute yourself and then that'll make you ready. And Thelma, I'll put you after John.
I think she already did.
John,
Okay, Marianne?
yes, you're open mic now. Good.
Oh, sorry, I had just received the call and I was trying to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you ready now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, okay. I can start. Anyway, my name's John and I'm with Delta Wordweavers. And I wanted to tell a little story about, well, I've first of all, I've been lucky to have many interesting travel adventures. Often, well, many have been with groups. A number of them have been with one other person. But some of my most memorable times have been when I've gone solo, traveling in Europe, traveling in the United States, whatever. And sometimes it leaves you more open to people. You're maybe a little more approachable than if you're so with somebody else, and then you end up being a little more assertive as well to try to hook up with others and get to know other people. But what I want to talk about was back in 1978 when I was on a fairly long trip traveling around in Europe, mostly by train, and I had many wonderful places. I'd usually try to line up staying at a youth hostel for two reasons. It was cheap, and it was also a nice way to meet people, maybe more so than a pension. Although a pension could be okay, but or bed and breakfast, but I often stayed at youth hostels. Well, there was a youth hostel I stayed at when I was in Amsterdam for a couple nights, and I think I found it in a book that I took along with me called "Let's Go Europe," and that gave recommendations of places and or often to do with price, but it could be youth hostels, it could be other locations. But I found a boat that I stayed on in Amsterdam for a couple nights, and I had a good time. But what really stuck out was the I think was the next after I'd stayed there one or two nights, I decided, like a lot of people traveling to Amsterdam, take the tour of the Heineken brewery. And well, I like beer, but I just thought, well, this would be kind of cool to take a tour of the brewery. And so I did. And while I was there, met some people, some other Americans who I got in a conversation with, and they said, well, if you're in Amsterdam, you need to stay at this. There's one place you really can't miss, and it was a place that had kind of it had an official name. It was not a youth hostel, but it was more like a bed and breakfast, but it had rooms of 8 to 10 men or 8 to 10 women, and in one room, and the price was great. There was a guy on that tour who told me about it. He says, you got to stay there, and it's called Hotel Van Ostad because it's named after Van Ostadstraat in Amsterdam, but its other name was Mama's Place. And I'll tell you more about that as we get into the story. But I thought, oh, I got to check this out. And so I ended up staying there. And what my amount of time I was going to stay in Amsterdam was very undetermined, but judging by the price where I stayed at and the wonderful nature of the lodging, I ended up staying there. Whereas in a lot of other cities, if I'm kind of checking them out, getting to know them a little bit, I might be 2, 3, 4 days in one major city. But This one I stayed at for pretty close to 2 weeks, and to the extent where there'd be people coming in for a couple days, and I almost got to be like a little, not a tour guide, but it's sort of I give recommendations and have, of places to go, maybe to go out with other people, and got a kick out of that. But staying at this lodging, it was, I understood why they called it Mama's Place. The woman that ran it, she wanted everybody to call her Mama. She was Jewish, had lost a lot of her family in the Holocaust, and she was just wonderful with, she had a kind of a crusty way actually, but she loved English speaking people especially. And you almost had to be there longer than a couple days to really get to know her style and be comfortable with her, because she had a heart of gold. It was this was back in 1978, but it was only $7 a night. That included breakfast with these fabulous crepes, and lunch was like a takeout lunch that you could do while you're going to the museums and all that. And dinner, which was sort of whether you did it or not. Some people weren't there at nighttime. You might have been doing some other things, but if you were there during dinner time, that was part of the deal too. And she did your laundry for free, even if you were there long enough to have laundry done. So what a deal. And one thing I learned about that woman was that at dinner time, especially, she didn't want any leftovers. And she made the best pea soup I ever had in my life, probably. I've had pea soup other places, pea soup Anderson's, whatever, different locations that have been tasty. But there was something about her pea soup was so hearty. And and when I was there with other people at dinner, I said how much I liked it. And so they said, well, John likes, I told Mama, he really likes it. And she didn't want any leftovers. And I tried to be, I loved it, but I wanted to be a little, make her feel good too. I ended up having 7, not really full bowls, but maybe 7 cups of pea soup to finish it up. And so I know I made her happy with that. Anyway, this place in Amsterdam, 14 years later, 1978, well, there were other trips in between, but when I was in Amsterdam in 1992, the place had changed ownership and was a little more expensive and some other things. I didn't stay there. But as I was traveling around after that, in that fall of 78, and other train trips, I talked to people about where they stayed, this and that. Some didn't know about Mama's Place. I told them about it. And other people knew about it specifically as Mama's Place. It had that reputation. So, I was lucky to stay at many wonderful youth hostels and other locations. I had an hour, I could tell you all about those too. But one that really stood out was Mama's Place in Amsterdam, and I will never forget it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Off to Amsterdam we go, but no more Mama's Place. A good memory though. Thank you. And Thelma, are you ready? Let's get Thelma up here. Okay, Thelma, unmute yourself. She's ready. You're on.
Hi, Marion.
Hi there. Welcome.
Hi, Thelma.
You have.
Are you ready, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. My name is Thelma Fields. I'm with Delta Wordweavers. And all these statues that are in the news lately. Have you ever thought, what would happen if they came alive? What would they do? But more importantly, what would you do? The story is called the golem. The old people say that the big ugly statue of stone had been in the park in New York City for years and years. Birds would perch on it. Young children would go by and say, "Why is that ugly statue there?" Well, I'm going to tell you why. Many, many, many years ago, there was a rabbi, a wealthy rabbi, who came to the United States from the old country. He brought with him his family and lots of crates of household goods, and one large, heavy crate that was put in the basement and left unopened. Many years passed, and the rabbi had a son, and he trained him to be the next rabbi. Well, one day, the rabbi died, and the young man left school and became the new rabbi. Well, years went by, but the new rabbi, the son, had not married or had any children, but he had a young apprentice that he was teaching to be a rabbi. The young apprentice was very eager to learn as much as he could, but one day, the old rabbi died suddenly. The apprentice went down to clean the basement one day, and there he found the crate. He opened it up, and inside he saw an ugly man carved out of stone. "Oh," said the young apprentice. He knew exactly what the man was. It was a golem. He knew golems had been created by the rabbis in Europe years and years ago to defend Jewish people in the ghettos that they had at that time. Well, he was so excited. He looked inside the crate, and in a corner he found a small roll of paper, and he unrolled it, and in and on the paper was the true name of God, which only a few people know. But the young man knew that this was what it was because that was the lore and the history of the Jewish people. And he knew what he was supposed to do. He knew that this creature created out of stone would do anything for a master. And that explained why the first rabbi was so wealthy. So he took that roll of paper and he placed it in the left ear of the golem. And immediately the golem rolled his eyes and stood up and got out of the crate. And the young man looked around that basement and said, "Clean up the basement." And the golem said, "Yes, master," and immediately started to work. Well, the young man, now freed from work, went up the stairs to make himself a cup of tea. But before long, there came sounds up the stairs, and there was the golem. And he said, "It's clean. I want something else to do. Tell me." Well, the young man looked down in the basement and saw that it was clean. And he looked around at the house and said, "Clean the house." And the golem said, "Yes, master." And he went to work on the house. Now, the tea that the young man had made was not even ready to drink when, guess what? The golem came back from the house and said, "The house is clean." Well, the young apprentice said, well, then go outside and mow the yard and trim the hedge and prune the trees. Well, the golem went outside, and the young man sat down on the nice comfy chair to read the newspaper. And before he had read even the first page, the golem was back again, asking, "What do you have for me to do next?" Well, the young man reached up to pull the roll of paper out of the ear of the golem. But the golem picked him up and started to shake him and said, "I like being alive. Tell me what you want me to do." Well, the young apprentice, was sitting shook like a rag doll, and he said, "Oh, go paint the house. Wash the windows. Sweep the sidewalk. Water the flowers, and fix the fence." Well, the golem went to work, but the young apprentice, he ran out of the house and down the street to the house of a retired rabbi and knocked at the door, and the rabbi let him in. And the rabbi asked, "What do you want, young man?" And the apprentice said, oh, Rabbi, and he told him the whole story. And the rabbi said, "Oh, young man, you have been very foolish. You have played with things you do not understand." Then came this cracking noise. The door, the hinges were off, and in stopped the golem. And he grabbed hold of the young apprentice and began to bang his head up on the ceiling and said, "Tell me what to do next, master." Well, the young man tried again to reach for the ear to get the paper out, but again it didn't work. And the young man
She lost her connection.
She seems to have been seized by the golem.
Yeah, she's disappeared.
Maybe that's what the story is. We don't know, but it worked at their good timing. So co-host Sarah, watch if she comes in. Maybe that was it to surprise us. We'll find out on another day. Okay, I've ordered the next ones. I thought I'd put Sally and the Farleys, and then Claire and David. Okay, so it's Sally be next, then the Farleys, then Claire, then David. Got it? Is that good? Anybody else going to have a story later today? All right, thanks all for joining us. I'll work with Sally here. Okay, Sally can unmute. You're on. Your sound is in, Sally.
All right. Well, I purchased the little white mouse at the pet food store. I got talked into it by my son. Now, Mom, if you buy this little white mouse for me, I'll take it home, I'll make a maze, and then I'll do a science experiment. I'm going to mix gin into milk, and then I'll give some to the mouse, and then I'll put more gin into the milk and give some to the mouse. And this experiment will prove that if you drink alcohol, you can't go through a maze. All right, and I'm going to make graphs and everything, and it will really, really impress my teacher. So I bought the little mouse. Now, it was so adorable. It was white, and it had little pink paws and a little pink nose, little pink mouth, little pink toenails. It was adorable. And we took it home and I gave my son directions. Now this mouse is to be kept in the cage. It is to be kept in your room and you are to clean the cage. So that was understood. And 2 days later, the maze was done and the experiment was to take place. And David, my son, invited his friends to come and assist him. And I'm downstairs in the kitchen and I hear, go mice, go mice, go mice. And I run upstairs to the room and there's the bottle of milk and there is the bottle of gin, which looks quite low to me. And there's nickels and dimes and quarters on the bed. And the boys are betting on this pet. And as I'm looking at them and looking at the money and looking at my son, the mouse jumps out of the box. And now we're looking for the mouse. The mouse is not under the bed. The mouse is not under the desk. The mouse is not in the closet. Don't know where the mouse has gone. So the experiment ended. All the boys went home. And then for the next week, there would be like spottings of the mouse. Mama, I saw the mouse coming out from under the bathroom door. Mama, the mouse has been in my closet. Shh, don't tell your father. And so we took to calling the mouse Ghost Mouse. And one of my children would say, I saw the ghost mouse today. Shh, don't tell your father. Well, it so happened that father held a cocktail party at the house to speak with some of his clients. And they're sitting in the living room having hors d'oeuvres and wine when there is a terrible shriek from one of the guests. And she stands up and she points. I just saw a rat. And now she's becoming hysterical. And my husband is looking at me and I said, no, it's not a rat. It's just a ghost mouse. It's only that big. It's just a little mouse. Well, the next day, husband says to me, get rid of the mouse. Get a trap, bait it with cheese and get rid of the mouse. But honey, that doesn't sound right to me. We've been leaving cheese out for this mouse for weeks now, and now we're going to bait a trap. That doesn't sound right. Get a trap and get the mouse. So I bought a trap and I put cheese in it and I put the trap in the kitchen. And then I had to go to the store. It was some hours later. I had to go to the store and the husband was left home with the children. And he told me that as he was sitting there in the den, he heard this tap, tap, tapping sound like Morse code on the floor. And he ran into the kitchen and there was the mouse caught by the tail in the trap, but barely. And he took a broom and he called the other children into the kitchen and they were all running after this trap, which was bouncing along with the mouse caught in the tail. And they had the broom and they scooped the trap up and the trap went this way and the mouse went that way. The trap landed on the floor. But the mouse, what in God's name happened to the mouse? Days went by and I'm lying in bed early in the morning and I feel down my arm and I get up and I look over the bed and there's a little mouse with his little pink paws, little pink mouth, little pink tail, and he's looking up at me. And I didn't tell a soul. Thank you.
And maybe the mouse has moved along with you throughout your life. Who knows?
Who knows?
Seen any more mice lately, Sally?
Nope, not in this house.
Thank you. Good. Yeah. Personal experiences can be fun after they happen, after they're a bit behind you. And now we go to the Farleys to tell us about the pumpkins.
The Hopping Pumpkin is a story that Jane Dorfman shared on the Storytel listserv quite a few years ago. Our copy has a date on it of 2015, but I think it was around before that.
There was a single older woman, lived alone. Maybe she was widowed. But anyway, she looked at the calendar and she said, oh my goodness, it's the end of October. I don't know if the children will be coming for a trick or treat this year, but I ought to do something to prepare. So she went out into the garden and she picked a pumpkin. She was a good gardener. She brought that pumpkin inside the kitchen. She cut off the top. She scooped out all the seeds and the stringy stuff in the middle. And she carved it with squinty eyes and a wry smile and kind of a crooked nose. And, oh, lovely. And she put a candle in it. She put the lid on and she took that pumpkin out to the front gate. And she said, well, there's a post right next to the gate. Boom! She put the pumpkin on the post. And the woman looked at the pumpkin.
The pumpkin looked at the woman, and the pumpkin said, "Wah!"
And she ran into the house.
"Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo," said the pumpkin. That was fun. And he pulled on his post, and he pulled on the post, and he pulled on that post until it came out of the ground. And the pumpkin hopped down the road on its one wooden leg until it came to where a man was fishing in the river. He hopped up right next to the man.
And the fisherman looked at the pumpkin.
The pumpkin looked at the fisherman, and the pumpkin went, "Wah!"
The fishing line went, the man jumped into the river and swam to the other side.
"Whoa!" said the pumpkin. That was fun. He hopped down the road on his wooden leg till he came to the bakery, where the baker
was just bringing out a tray of beautiful pumpkin-shaped cookies with orange frosting and little faces on them. And she was about to put them in the glass sales counter for sale when this pumpkin comes to the door. And she looks at the pumpkin.
And
She
the
looks
pumpkin
at the
looked at the baker, and the pumpkin went, "Wah!"
Up cookies went everywhere.
"No!" said
And the
pumpkin.
baker went back in the kitchen.
That was fun. The pumpkin hopped down the road on its wooden leg till it came to a farmer with a load of turnips and a wheelbarrow.
And he was pushing that wheelbarrow down the road. You know, a wheelbarrow has just one wheel. You got to keep it pretty well balanced. And he was taking those turnips home to feed his hungry pig. He saw this pumpkin. He looked at the pumpkin.
The pumpkin looked at the farmer, and the pumpkin went, "Wah!"
Woof! The turnips spilled all over the road, and oh, it's going to take him forever to
said
pick
the
'em up.
pumpkin. That was fun. And he hopped on down the road till he came to the farmhouse, and he saw the farmer's wife
Sitting on the porch doing unspeakable things to a pumpkin.
to make pumpkin pie with it. The pumpkin did not want to become pumpkin pie, so it hopped around the corner to where it saw the pig pen.
The pig was hungry. He looked at the pumpkin.
The pumpkin looked at the pig. The pumpkin said, "Wah!"
The pig wasn't scared. The pig was hungry, and he ate the pumpkin.
And the pig said,
Oh, that was good.
And that was good. Did you like it? My husband Fred liked it. He's over there on the couch listening. We're laughing. It was joyous, delightful. All right. Oh, that was great. Just really fun.
"If anyone wants a copy, we have it in our computer. We could email it to you as an attachment."
Yeah, it fits in my file of the, what did I tell the other day? I told Strange Company. I pulled out the kids' stories. Who knew? I told them to, let me think. The Monday night storytellers. Oh no, it was a Thursday morning San Francisco group. Now I remember. Okay, next we have Claire Castell. And she's
Hi.
to tell us, oh, she's there, Halloween and the Duck Man. Oh.
You made me hungry, you guys. I'm craving pumpkin pie right now.
And those cookies. Mm.
Well, Halloween is for kids, right?
Sometimes.
Wrong. Yeah, no, lots of adults like Halloween, and we see it as a chance to dress up in sexy clothes or as a scary monster or become somebody else for a night. And in my neighborhood, there are lots of adults who go all out for Halloween decorations, kids or not. When I moved here, my next door neighbor was the assistant minister for the Greek Orthodox Church. His name was Ari, and he loved all the holidays. And for Halloween, he put up enormous blow up pumpkins on his lawn, and he had monsters on his roof and ghosts on his roof. He went all out, and Christmas was another thing. But religious and secular, it was all over the top, but a lot of fun. Well, a few years ago, I retired and I started taking my daily walk of about 2 miles in the morning and in the neighborhood. And I got to see up close a lot of these homes where Halloween decorations were clearly not just for kids. There was a gay couple who put up spiders on pulleys and rats on a wire, and then they projected these Boris Karloff movies onto their windows. It was amazing. But my favorite house was the old Duckman. The Duckman went all out with skull lights and realistic recording groans, monster groans. But what scared the shit out of me was on his roof, he had this terrifying apocalyptic demon horseman. And this was all mounted on his TV antenna. But the horse was black and the rider wore tattered black clothes. And when the wind blew, the horseman rocked, and it was scary. And because this was such a production, he did end up keeping most of his decorations up year round. Now, the Duckman was called that because he kept pet ducks. He always had 4 ducks in his front yard, and he told me he had a lot more in the backyard. But these 4 were trained just to stay on the front yard, not fly away, not walk away. And his yard was elevated about 10 steps from the street. And they had a plastic swimming pool, and I really enjoyed stopping every morning and visiting the ducks. I even named them. There was Donald, Quackers, Peggy Sue, and Dave. And I'd walk up and I was listening for their quiet quacks, and I'd greet them, quack, 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 ducks. Oh, where is Peggy Sue? And sometimes the Duckman himself would come out and talk. Well, those ducks, they do like to eat. I give them lettuce, I give them cabbage, and I give them kale. But I tell you what, they do not like the kale, understandably. And one day the Duckman confessed to me that he was really very sick. And he didn't say what, but I think it was cancer. Well, one day late in the summer last year, I noticed the ducks were not outside. So at first I thought maybe he's letting the ducks out later in the day. So I started to vary the timing of my walk. So maybe go at 11 o'clock and thinking, well, maybe I'll see the ducks. But I still didn't see them, and it was weeks. I asked a neighbor of his who was out gardening one day what happened to the old man and the ducks. He said, oh, I'm really sorry. The old man died. Oh. Well, I kept on walking, and I saw an old woman, his wife, the following week, setting out old men's clothes on the curbs for giveaways, like they do in many neighborhoods. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I heard your husband passed away. He was so sweet. It was his own damn fault. I don't have time for those ducks. They're a mess. They eat all the food. I've got to get rid of them. She went on and on complaining about this man. And I felt so bad that this really nice, sweet duckman had such a mean and evil wife. I mean, how bad can a man be if he keeps ducks? Well, I kept passing the house on my walks, but I never again heard the little quacks of Peggy Sue or Dave or quackers. The Halloween came up and I walked around in the neighborhood to enjoy all the decorated houses. My friend Patrice lives across the street from the gay couple who has the spiders on the pulleys and the rats on the wires and the projected movies. So I stopped there to enjoy the show and have a glass of wine or two with Patrice. It was a lot of fun. And on the way home, I decided to go by the Duckman's house. The wife had taken down most of the decorations, the Halloween decorations since his death, but she hadn't managed to get down the demon horseman on the roof. So it's up there and it's flapping and it's rocking. And I think that's kind of odd because there is no breeze that night. Now, maybe I had too much wine at Patrice's house, but I saw the horseman's head turn toward me. And I didn't remember that he had glowing orange eyes like that. And then I heard a faint sound quietly, but I recognized it. Quack, 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 quack. The duckman was back. That's my story. And it's 90% true.
Thank you, Claire. Lots of spooky things can be hanging around on the lines and the antenna wires, yet in that wind. And maybe not. Could be the ducks. Thank you. Okay, just before David, I didn't do announcements yet. SAC has, this is October 21st, a Wednesday, is the next SAC event, which is called Genre Storytelling. And their theme is spooky. So they've already got 6 storytellers from different swaps lined up for a spooky theme. To look that up and look up the other SAC events, go to their website. We'll type it in on chat, or if Shags is here, Shags will type it in. It's storysac.org. And on the very front, on the left-hand column, has the genre, Stories in Living Color. We just had that the other night. It's fantastic. And that's going on for every month. And so is their genre storytellers every month. Also every month are every swap group. So look up the swap groups. And in November, it's true that Delta Wordweavers is I'm having my swap group plus Telebration because they're separated by like 3 weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and have both for me. And Telebration specifically for Delta Wordweavers. Yay, Mr. Right below me on my screen, Larry Kluger, wave your hand. Larry Lariat. He's one of my storytellers. And we're going to have Marcy Delgadillo and Ben Tucker. Those are the representatives of, I say, the Northern California Wordweavers on my Telebration. And then, Ron Chick from the South Coast Storytellers. Do you know who the 3 or 4 tellers are from down there? You're muted. He's not in charge. He may or may not know who Betsy got up for her tellers. But the swap, the Southern swap, we're doing a joint. They give contribute tellers, and so do I.
I heard that Angela Lloyd might be part of it, but I really don't know. I hadn't seen the announcement. So I'm planning on telling my one and only Thanksgiving-ish story. It isn't really Thanksgiving, but it's a story of sharing and caring.
Okay, because yeah, we've got family stories, historical stories. And so join for the celebration November 19th on a Thursday evening. This is the South Coast usual swap evening. That's why it got picked there. It's also on the SAC website. We have on the list celebrations. So you go right there to see the, they're all free, but you got to check in, not necessarily ahead, but get the link for that. So there's a lot going on, and you can find out many things right on SAC and make yourself so busy, you'll have to pick and choose. Yeah, Tom's shaking his head, huh? There's so much going on. We just got done with the National Festival for those who went. That was fabulous. It was the same week as the Marsh put on a whole week of events. It's just a lot. Okay. Thank you,
Menlo
one and all,
Park,
for coming.
Menlo
We're gonna
Park
hear-
Library has an extensive series of storytelling all this month. Dovey Thomason tomorrow night, other people throughout the month. Check the Menlo Park Library website, it's free.
Menlo Park website for free with Dovey Thompson. I know one of our tellers today who would be interested in that. Okay, our other teller today is David McGaffey. Welcome, David, and yeah, he'll tell us a bit about his story. Let's get him
Well,
on.
I had difficulty deciding what story to tell. I had a whole bunch. I had a true story of an adventure in Turkey in 1967. But as I listened to other people's stories, other things came to mind. So particularly Sue's. I met your character in Afghanistan and Iran and Turkey, going by the pseudonym of Mullah Nasruddin, or Nasruddin Hoja. But your specific story reminded me of one that I think you all might enjoy. There was a preacher who had just graduated from one of the finest schools in the world. And he was stuffed full of knowledge. He knew the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Torah, the fathers of the church, the theologians. And he finally got an invitation to come down to a church in Texas as a trial. They would see how he fit. Well, he went down there, and arrived all right, but the night that he arrived, there was a blizzard. There was 16 inches of snow on every road, and he was thinking he was lucky that the place that they put him up was right next to the church. So the next morning, Sunday morning, he went into the church and laid out all of his notes and looked out and found out that the church was basically empty. There was one old farmer sitting about halfway back. And he looked at all of his notes and got down from the pulpit and walked back to the farmer and said, I've prepared a pretty good sermon, I think, but there's just you. Should I bother to give it? And the farmer said to him, well, if I loaded up a truck full of good hay and drove all the way up to the South 40, and I only found one cow up there, I wouldn't let the cow go hungry. And the preacher said, you're absolutely right. And went back to the pulpit and gave his sermon. He gave hellfire and brimstone. He gave angels and harps. He gave salvation. He gave wisdom. He gave everything. At the end of the sermon, he got down from the pulpit, walked back to the man and said, how'd I do? And the farmer looked at him and said, well, if I loaded a truck full of fine hay and drove all the way up to the South 40, and I only found one cow, I wouldn't make that cow eat the whole damn truckload. And that's my story.
Thank you, David. That was great. And today we have not told the whole damn plethora of stories that we have. We've got more. I put on the chat the website for StorySack. For those who, across the bottom of your screen, you click on chat and it brings it off to the side, the little typed messages. So we have every swap group on there at the beginning. And then the Farleys put on the Menlo Park information. So go off to get those. And then I put on the storysack.org. So we haven't told all the stories today. There's a lot more out there. And we look forward to seeing everybody in the future at our coming events. So see y'all next time. Thanks for coming. Bye.